Projection.
It's Friday morning, and you know what that means. It's time for another episode of the Alabama Slam Podcast. I'm your host, Corey Hanna, with my co-host.
What's going on, guys? This is Patrick Akers.
And we've got a whole lot to cover today. There's breaking news earlier today of Logan Paul signing with WWE. It looks like he's got a fairly long-term deal from what I read earlier. I don't remember all of the details. And then we're going to get into the Forbidden Door recap, and then we've also got a quick recap and breakdown of Blood and Guts from last night. And if you watched Forbidden Door, you know there's a ton of matches there, and then there was a lot of action last night in Blood and Guts. So let's get to the Logan Paul news first, Patrick. I just mentioned that before we started rolling, and you hadn't seen it yet. So I know you watched Mania this year, and I only watched like a couple of the matches. I saw the Cody and Seth match, but you know, I was skeptical about the Logan Paul thing because the only thing I know about him is that he's a YouTuber and he's done boxing matches and shit. And my buddy Blair, shout out Blair Krieger, sent me a message earlier and was like, "Hey, this just happened. He signed with WWE." And I was like, "Man, I haven't seen any of his matches." And he was like, "He's only done one, and it was at Mania." And he said it was pretty solid, top to bottom. And you had similar thoughts before we started recording.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back, I think I even wrote this for a review for the Alabama Take on. We weren't doing this podcast yet, so my review for WrestleMania this year is just an article. But in terms of just star quality, Logan Paul in that WrestleMania match looked like he belonged. And dare I say, he looked like as big, if not a big of a star, as anybody else on that Mania card. And I mean, you want to talk about a dude getting nuclear levels of heat from the crowd. Everything about he did, like he just got professional wrestling, even though that was his first match. Everything about it, from the pace he did in that match, the way he soaked in the booze and knew when he was hitting, he hit those Three Amigos suplexes and even pointed to the sky. You know, all those guys do it for Eddie Guerrero, but he hit them, and just when he hit the first one, he just laid there, and the boo started coming down from the crowd because they knew exactly what was about to happen. And then he flipped his hits and hit the second one, hit the third one, and then he gets up on the top rope and does a little shoulder shimmy like the way Eddie used to do. And I mean, the way the crowd just, you know, fucking hated that guy. So if he's going to keep doing this going forward, like, it's super interesting, and he fits WWE. And like you said, you know, he's kind of blossomed to from just being a YouTuber to now he's kind of like this sports mogul almost with his boxing matches. So this is interesting. He's going to have an avenue here, and WWE hopefully is going to do some interesting things with him. Obviously, the way that WrestleMania match ended, you know, looks like he's going to be doing a storyline here with The Miz, I would guess. And then keep that thing going from WrestleMania. So, you know, it'll keep me intrigued. Is it going to make me start watching WWE again? No, but I will. I'll watch the clips and see what this guy does. He's got some potential here for sure.
Is he good with the mic at all?
Oh yeah, like I mean, that's all he does, right? Like he's turned himself into. Well, let me say this: everything he's done has just been some kind of extension of professional wrestling, right? Like you look at the boxing. And the shit talking he does there to get those guys, the shit talking he's done to Floyd Mayweather, like that's just pro wrestling. Like that's all it is. So it's going to transition well from the boxing ring to the wrestling ring to the shit talking he was doing in there to the wrestling promos he's going to be doing inside the middle of the ring. So yeah, I would suspect that he's going to be, you know, is he going to win the heavyweight championship? Probably not. But is he going to generate headlines and clicks and views for the WWE, which is what all this is about? Absolutely. There's no question about that.
Gotcha. Well, I know we've got a ton of matches to cover, Forbidden Door. So I say let's move on into that. First up, we got Jericho and Guevara and Suzuki versus Eddie Kingston, Wheeler Yuta, and Umino. You know, top to bottom, when we can cover this, you know, a little bit later too. But Going into Forbidden Door, I was only slightly familiar with some of the New Japan people, and that was because some of the crossover they had done in the previous few weeks and some of the packages they did. So there were some of these matches I was looking forward to more than others, but I thought top to bottom it was a really entertaining night, and it came in under 4 hours, which they didn't do with Double or Nothing.
Yeah. That's impressive considering the amount of action that was packed in that 4 hours.
Yeah,
or under 4 hours.
There was a lot of damn matches going on. But,
so I guess before we get into any specifics, if you want to just kind of hit on a general, because you're a pretty good barometer for where I think probably a lot of the AEW audience is and the pro wrestling fans here in America are in general, in the sense that you knew very little about a lot of these guys going into it, right?
Right, correct.
So I guess your overall impression now, a couple of days past, what did you think about this crossover just as a whole? And what do you think about these New Japan guys that came in, and how do you feel like the whole event went?
I mean, overall, I never really got bored with any of it. There were, some of them stood out more than others to me. I liked watching Okada. I liked watching Will Ospreay. I mentioned that last week. Because he had a couple of matches on AEW the previous weeks. Could he end up in AEW full time? I don't really know what his contract situation looks like over there, but I think he would go over real well on TV over here all the time.
I mean, did it feel like a big deal? I guess what I'm asking, did it feel like a big enough of a deal to you? Because it registered that to me, so I'm wondering what. But again, I knew a lot of these guys going from previous history.
It did, and part of that is because I knew that quite a bit of the AEW folks had spent time in New Japan before starting AEW, so I knew that there was a lot of respect there for a lot of those people and their brand. So I kind of figured that they would step it up and make sure that the people that have been following New Japan for a while kind of really got their money's worth. And for me, as somebody that didn't know really jack shit about New Japan, it held my attention. I thought it was pretty great, top to bottom, and lived up to the hype.
Yeah, that's the only reason I asked that question is because I was wondering how it registered to someone who didn't have that prior knowledge. Because to me, this pay-per-view felt like a big damn deal, and these New Japan guys felt like a big deal. Not only to those fans there in Chicago, but it came across the screen in a way. Like you're talking about the guy in the first match, Shota Umino. He looked like he was legit. He looked like a big deal. You mentioned Okada. He looked like a big deal. Ospreay, Zack Sabre Jr., Suzuki, Jay White, all these guys, Tanahashi, all these dudes felt like they belonged in that ring. And not only that they belonged in that ring, but some of these guys felt like bigger stars than some of the dudes that are currently on the AEW roster, Yeah. I mean, I would say a guy like Okada, I mean, he's as big of a deal and looked the part as anybody else on AEW. So that's why I asked that question. Overall, too, before we get any specifics about this, because I have a pretty damning take about this, but what did you think about the commentary as a whole?
It felt weird to me, and I think I texted you at some point that because they didn't start off with like Shivani and JR.
Right. So that's what. So there's a clear mark if you go back and watch pay-per-view between the first half of the show and the second half of the show. I believe JR only came out. Did he only come out for the very end?
That seems right. And, he, they did that last night with Blood and Guts. He came out for the second half of the show, and I read an article today that said that it looks like moving forward, that's what they're going to do, and then he'll be mostly on the second half of Dynamite, and then he'll be on Rampage.
So I'm wondering if this is coming from JR himself, if he's realizing he doesn't have his fastball anymore, because, I mean, clearly he doesn't.
Yeah.
Or if this is coming from Tony Khan himself saying, hey, some of the commentary goofs that you and I have talked about on this podcast, they're starting to kind of add up.
Yeah, I noticed he kept calling Bryan Danielson. He kept calling him Daniel Bryan a lot. And then apparently last night, when I read the article about him being moved and being shifted around was that there was a lot of him calling Claudio Cesaro last night, which I kept thinking I would try to listen for, but I was too involved in trying to keep up with the match to really tell. But the way I read it today was that it was just Tony Khan trying to shake things up a little bit, but I also think that, for the show to seem like it's trying to really compete with WWE as a product, I mean, gotta love JR, but he's not in tip-top form.
Yeah, and you can... Two things can be true at once, right? You can say that JR is a legend and is probably the best wrestling commentator ever. If not the best, then surely he is the most iconic and has had some of the most iconic calls in recent wrestling history. So with that being said, you can also say he ain't what he used to be.
Correct.
And clearly he's not there anymore. And I thought the first half of this pay-per-view with the three-man booth of Kevin Kelly, Excalibur, and Taz was fantastic. And should be the three-man booth going forward. I love Tony Schiavone as well, but it seemed to drag down the commentary whenever Schiavone got introduced, and for sure when JR got introduced, because there's just too many people at that point.
Yeah, to me, it is a little weird, though, just from my perspective, to have Taz as a commentator and then also come out with Team Taz when that's a thing, because it just seems, I don't know, you wouldn't see, like, a football coach do that, like, in the middle of the season. Like, hey, here's my team, and then I'm in the booth the next day or the same day, commentating on a game. It's just a little awkward to me. I don't know. That's my take on it. It seems a little weird, like maybe he should do one or the other. And I think he's a hell of an announcer. But I also get that he wants to be a part of, like, the factions and things as well. So,
yeah, I think there's a balance you can play there. I mean, we've seen it before. Eric Bischoff did this in WCW with the NWO. Vince McMahon, I think, did this as well back in the day. So it doesn't bother me that much. I think Taz is much more useful as a commentator than he is as a on-screen personality, let's say, being the head of some kind of faction. I don't even necessarily think it's bad to call it Team Taz and have a bunch of guys. It could be like his mark of approval in the same way that William Regal is doing it with the Blackpool Combat Club. But that three-man booth, Kevin Kelly is primarily a New Japan and Ring of Honor announcer. I don't know what his contract looks like for AEW, but I think that should be the booth going forward. Those three men, because it was just excellent. The commentary adds a lot to the match too. Whenever you have the commentators, if they think it's a big deal, it's going to come across the screen to you at home that what you're watching is also a big deal. Like, it elevates the match in and of itself. And just the end of this match with Moxley and Tanahashi, I think one of the reasons... The Moxley-Tanahashi match was great, but JR kind of drug it down a little bit, and we'll get into some specifics when we start talking about the match. Yeah. But those are my two kind of overarching things for the pay-per-view. And it looks to be a success. I think Tony Khan tweeted out, $6 million in ticket sales and pay-per-view buys combined. So that seems to be a resounding success, and I would assume this is not the last time that happens. Maybe next time Forbidden Door 2 with, next year, once hopefully some COVID restrictions in Asia loosen up a little bit, maybe we get a Forbidden Door over in Japan. I think that would be cool. But
could be cool. So what'd you think of the first match with Jericho and Suzuki and Guevara?
So last week I think I mentioned that I thought this one might be the one that was going to kind of be the worst one of the night. And by the way, I don't think there was a bad match on this card at all, like not even close. But this first one was surprising. I underestimated how awesome it would be to see Eddie Kingston and Minoru Suzuki in the middle of the ring just chopping the shit out of each other. Yeah. Turns out that's really awesome to watch. And, one of the directives in this match, probably for some New Japan guys, was like, hey, we got a lot of stock invested in Shota Umino, and so we need him to look like a star. And he looked like a star to me. I mean, he looked crisp. His stuff looked impactful. He obviously had that history there with Chris Jericho. They did a good job playing that up and showcasing why those two have a history from Jericho's time in Japan. So I thought this match was really awesome, and it surprised me when Jericho and them got the win, but obviously going into Blood and Guts last night, I mean, there was a reason for that. You didn't want Kingston and his guys winning 2 times in a row, right? You needed to give some shine to Jericho, especially if they're going to do the job in the big payoff match at Blood and Guts. So I thought this was a great way to kick off the pay-per-view.
Yeah, for sure. And they didn't spend too much time on any of the matches, really. And I think that was probably for the betterment of the show. Just keep things moving.
This Eddie momentum, though, it keeps growing week to week.
Yeah.
Like we're getting somewhere with this, and I don't know how it pays off. You and I think both want to believe really badly that it pays off with Kingston taking the title off CM Punk at some point when he comes back. But I mean, man, it's jumping ahead a little bit. It said something last night in Blood and Guts that who was the last guy to come in that ring? It was Eddie Kingston. So just keep that in mind as we keep going. We might be getting on to a legendary top babyface run here with Eddie Kingston.
Yeah, because it was billed as Blackpool Combat Club versus the Jericho Appreciation Society,
right?
And Kingston is not a member of the Blackpool Combat Club.
Nope.
But I mean, kind of knew that was going to happen, but it didn't really downplay it any when it did happen, because you could just feel the electricity when he stepped in. But yeah, we'll touch on that again later. I say let's move on and keep this thing rolling with Roppongi Vice versus United Empire versus FTR for the Ring of Honor and IWGP tag titles. I think we all kind of knew this one would be a banger. This was the one, I think, where we talked about, we thought the belts would stay within the organizations, and I think you were the one that said that FTR could end up winning the belts and having a cross-promotional belt exchange. So I think you called that one properly.
Yeah, I mean, if there was one point where you were going to let the belts change hands, it would be to FTR. And that's exactly what happened. If listeners out there aren't that familiar with Japanese wrestling has a storied history of really tough-nose, bruiser, blue-collar type of American wrestlers going over there and having a ton of success. Stan Hansen, Vader, Bruiser Brody, I mean, all these legendary names had a ton of success in Japan. The Japanese crowd really responds to those type of wrestlers. So I would, as soon as FTR can go over to Japan and defend those belts, I would imagine they're going to become fan favorites pretty quickly. Because it's not like Japanese fans aren't aware of the wrestling that's happening over here in the States. I mean, they have the internet like anybody else. They're just as aware of what's happening here. So, good call by FTR, taking the belts, and you would imagine they're going to be big stars going forward. So I guess they're just going to collect all the belts now. I mean, they looked badass last night on Dynamite.
Yeah.
So maybe those AEW titles are next, and we'll go ahead and is there, like when you go through the drive-thru and they give you like one of those carrier cases to put all your drink, if you get like 4 drinks, is there something like that for pro wrestling? Is there like a cart that they can wheel out or something, or should they just
need one.
They need to hire an intern that just like holds them all?
Yeah,
because they're gonna have all of them going forward.
So it looked like Dax got injured at one point, but then it turns out that was probably just a work. He had some tape on his shoulder last night, but everything that I've read was that it was mostly a work because there have been so many injuries lately, and they kind of thought that might get a little heat on it, by being like, oh, here's another injury, but then he comes out, they end up winning the belts, all's good, and then they come out last night, and we'll touch on that too, but they turn around and come out with Danhausen a couple nights later, but yeah, I thought that was when I first saw it, I was like, well, shit, here goes somebody else. And I was like, what happens? They've got this run built up for them, and then he gets all fucked up and can't come back out and finish the match. But, he comes back out and gets the job done.
Yeah, and that was just a little chef's kiss on the whole way to build the match. I think I texted you, like, I could tell it was a work as soon as it happened, just from doing the little bit of indie wrestling that I did and having some kind of insider knowledge about how these matches are put together. You could tell it was a work just because nothing with the match afterwards got discombobulated. So, like, we'll hit on this a little bit later, but that four-way match for the IWGP title, that was a legitimate injury, which is why the ending of that match looked rushed and looked kind of off. There was nothing about this match that got off place or jumbled up after Dax went out with the injury.
Gotcha. Yeah, we did text some about that.
Yeah. So everyone, that was again, like you mentioned, everyone had so many fears going into this card that something else bad would happen injury-wise, just based off of what's happened. CM Punk was out, Danielson was out, all these guys were out. So that's just a nice little way to play on the emotion with the crowd, and then, he comes back out and gets a standing ovation. They hit the big rig, and now they're the champs. So you love to see it.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that's left is for them to get the AEW titles.
Yeah, that would be it. I don't even know. They got AAA, they got Ring of Honor, IWGP, AEW. I don't even know if there's another one that you I mean, Rev Pro in England, I guess, where Ospreay is the champ. I guess you could take those. But, they're going to have to... They might have one of those lists the way that Steve Buscemi has in Billy Madison, where it's just like a kill list, They go down, whatever booker wants to give them a title, just go ahead and give them a call, and I'm sure they'll take it.
Yeah. So next after that, it was Pac versus Miro versus Malachi Black versus Clark Connors for the All-Atlantic Championship in AEW. Just a banger.
Yeah,
from top to bottom on this one. Shout
out to Clark Connors. I didn't know who this dude was, and he was a late injury replacement. But they gave him some shine in this match, and he had some fire about him. He got the crowd behind him too. So shout out to him with the cowboy hat, and he hit the spear on Miro, right, to go through the table? I think that was him. Yeah. Kudos to him. Yeah, like you said, just banger of a match, and I think you and I both called it too. Pac is the right call to have this title. He needs it. He needs something. He's been underutilized, not even necessarily to his fault or anybody else's fault. The COVID thing happened, which basically took him off television for months. He's had some injuries that have plagued him both here in AEW and his time at WWE. So the finish to this match was awesome too, with the 450 coming down and then hitting the brutalizer. Just awesome. Just kudos to all these guys all the way around. Another fantastic match for all these guys. So let's see what happens with Pac. You would have to think that him and Malachi and this House of Black Death Triangle feud keeps going, and now there's a title involved in it too to kind of elevate the stakes. So this was awesome.
Yeah, and those guys, they seem to work pretty well together. They've put on any of the things they've been involved in recently have been pretty top notch. So if they keep, I'm usually one for getting these rivalries over with, within a couple 3 months. But if they want to keep playing this one up, I'm here for it.
Yeah, I mean, and Pac is a kind of a guy where he's so good that it's easy to have a chemistry with. Like go back and look at his matches he had with Omega. Look at the matches. I think him and Moxley had an awesome match. I mean, that's all this dude has ever done is just put on awesome matches. His one flaw is that his character and his mic work just isn't there.
Right.
That's the only thing that's really holding him back. And also, he looks like a fucking $1 million, man.
Yeah.
Like, to just be that damn ripped and that muscular, but still be able to have that athleticism and that agility, like, it's just impressive stuff.
Yeah. So, yeah, do you think that they'll, leave that one on him for a year and then do another big event for the All-Atlantic, in another year? Or is that something they'll defend every couple months? They'll have, a match where he'll, defend that title? Or how do you think they work this one? So
that's interesting because you kind of... I think for an organization, you kind of need your titles to be defended and changed at different frequencies. And what I mean by that is you look at the TBS title with Jade Cargill. She's probably going to hold on to that belt a little bit longer, or probably a lot longer, actually. You look at the AEW World Heavyweight Championship. It's not necessarily in your best interest to hotshot that thing around because you want a level of prestige to come with that title. Now, with the TNT title, they've kind of done a combination of both, right? They have had guys like Miro who have defended this thing and held it for a long time. And then they've had guys like Sammy and Scorpio and Darby and all. They've hot-shotted it around to a bunch of different people. So
Yeah.
the All-Atlantic might probably fall in that latter category. I would imagine that they kind of hot-shot this thing around to some different people. Maybe Pac holds it for a couple months and then it, goes off to the next guy. Probably, on an episode of Dynamite or something like that. So I just think it's cool. If you're going to have all these titles, they all can't operate at the same level of pace. You kind of have to have some variety there. So we'll see what happens with it. But he's a great first champion. And, this is a good opportunity for him, too. If he turns in a lot of really fantastic matches, could that AEW fan base do something similar for him in the way that they have done for Eddie Kingston, which is get behind him in a way to where now it makes sense to elevate him into the main event scene. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens with it.
So next up was Bullet Club versus Dudes with Attitudes, which was probably the lowest stakes match of the night, I would say. I mean, in terms of there was really nothing on the line there.
Yeah, there was no build.
There was no build to it, no angle really. Still fine match. Anytime you got Darby Allin in a ring, something entertaining is going to happen. But overall, maybe my least favorite of the night.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the big takeaway from this is we talked about last week. When's the point going to come where Sting jumps off something crazy? Usually happens later in the match. They just decided, fuck it, we're just going to start with it. We'll just have him do it from the beginning. So that's great to see. And man, Sting, at some point we need to talk about on this podcast too, where he fits all time. He's one of my favorite wrestlers ever. I still maintain that his story against the NWO, where he basically just went up in the rafters for a year, didn't say anything, and kind of picked them apart one by one, is still the greatest wrestling story I think that's ever been told. Now, that comes with a huge caveat that the culmination of that story was an absolute shit show. The match between him and Hogan for the title was just absolutely awful and dreadful. But still, that story was great, and Sting has just been, they say it when he comes out. He's an icon. And so it's cool to see him still be doing it at, I think he's 63?
Yeah, 62 I thought, but
somewhere
he may
like
have had
that.
a birthday recently.
He's old. Oh, like old.
Yeah.
And he's still getting it done, man. So
Yeah.
the payoff, whenever he decides to retire, and hopefully that's not for a long time, hopefully we still got a couple more years out of Sting, you would have to think that Darby's the one that pins him, right? Just based off the rapport that they have. So that'll be a pretty emotional story whenever we get around to it. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't much to say from this match. It was good too. Like you said, lowest stakes involved, so but still good nonetheless.
Yeah. So next up was Thunder Rosa versus Toni Storm for the AEW Women's title. Pretty good match ended up being. We've done our fair share of poor mouthing the women's division. But I thought this was pretty entertaining from my standpoint, at least.
Yeah, I think it was one of Thunder Rosa's better matches. I don't think it was better than the Lights Out match. I do think it was better than the cage match that she had against Britt where she won the title. Just in terms of a wrestling standpoint. It surprised me that they kept the belt on her, though. Were you surprised when she got the win?
A little bit, yeah. And maybe the only reason for that is so that they can try to build her up just a little more. And because she hasn't had the belt for that long. So I don't know. Maybe they just didn't want to cheapen her title run by taking it off of her so quickly. But there is a little bit of work to be done there. I thought this went a pretty good way, though, in helping build her up as a little bigger star, though. Her gear was awesome. I don't know. It was probably the best women's match they've had in a while.
Yeah, she has, we've talked about this before. What her strengths are is in the ring. She's got a lot of babyface fire about her. Her gear always looks cool. The face paint looks cool. But she has similar problems in the way that Pac has similar problems, which is when you have someone whose main strength is the in-ring work, it kind of limits them in the kinds of stories they can tell and the ways that you can use them to get them over, because they have to have matches. Like, Thunder Rosa's promos just aren't good. Like, she's had plenty of chances now to go out there, and they're not good. She's not a talker, which is fine. I mean, a lot of people aren't. But then if that's the case, then we have to constantly have you in the ring, and it takes up TV time, because a promo you can do in a minute, 2 minutes. Well, a match, if you're going to do it right, you need at least 10 minutes. Well, that's going to eat into some of the other stories we're telling. So it'll be interesting to see how going forward they use her, because like you said, they probably didn't want to take the title off of her this quickly, because one, that doesn't do anything for Thunder Rosa, and two, that does kind of admit that this isn't working, and it kind of cheapens that title even more. It's an admission that you've failed, basically. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah,
so,
for sure.
We'll see what happens. I just thought Tony had a lot of momentum going forward. We really haven't got a chance to see Tony Storm that much, like in promos and be kind of in the spotlight. So you would have to imagine, though, her time's going to come at some point. But then this begs the question, who's going to be Thunder Rosa's next competitor? Because we have Athena and Chris Statlander tied up with Jade Cargill. I mean, who else is left? You don't want to run the Britt Baker thing back this quickly.
Right.
Do you do Ruby Soho? But then that's two baby faces. You've already done two baby faces with Tony and Thunder. So they got some options here, but it's time to step this up. We need to elevate it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, next up was probably my favorite of the night, and the one that I was looking forward to the most. It was Orange Cassidy versus Will Ospreay for the IWGP US title. Just all entertainment in this one. These dudes put on a hell of a match, and it paid off the way I thought it would. I kind of figured Ospreay would retain, and they wouldn't put that belt on Cassidy just yet. There were a lot of highlights in this one.
Yeah, I mean, Ospreay has proven once again that he's everything he says he is. I mean, he's that dude. He is almost unparalleled. There's very few guys that can touch his talent inside that ring. I mean, you could probably count the dudes on one hand, right? So the way that he's been introduced to AEW fans, I would love to see this guy be in AEW full-time. I think he has a ton of potential there. And the chemistry between these two, shout out to Orange Cassidy too. The chemistry was just off the charts. And it happens in a lot of places in life and a lot of artistic things, and you were in bands. I'm sure it happens in bands quite a bit. Sometimes you just click with somebody. Like it's nothing necessarily both of you are trying to do. It's just kind of something unspoken where you just kind of you're operating on the same wavelength. You're hitting all the same notes in the right sort of way with each other. So I mean, their chemistry was just off the charts. It has been for the entire time that they've been doing this little feud. And man, yeah, this was match of the night, I think, for me by far. And I think that's consensus for a lot of fans out there. I think a lot of fans, the two big takeaways from Forbidden Door was man, it's awesome to have Claudio in AEW. And Ospreay versus Cassidy was the best match, and Ospreay is fucking great. I think those are the two big takeaways from Forbidden Door.
Yeah, and everything about his presentation and everything is pretty great too. Like his ring gear, you know, was it the United Empire? I just said it a minute ago and I've already forgotten.
United Empire.
But those dudes that come out with him, they've got great gear as well. Dude's a star, and I would love to see more of him. If they could somehow get him in AEW full time, that would be pretty fucking awesome.
And one of these things about wrestling too is just like, I think that you can see that star potential right from the get-go, right? Like as soon as the guy walks out of the tunnel, you're immediately making a judgment like, this dude's a star or this dude isn't a star. And like you said, everything about Ospreay just drips with superstardom. Like, clearly he's put in the work. He looks awesome. The talent in the ring is awesome. And so this was just great all the way around. And, no ring rust at all from Orange Cassidy, which is impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, so you mentioned Claudio a minute ago. They were up next, and, we kind of figured it, and a lot of people figured that he would be Danielson's mystery replacement to face Zack Sabre Jr., and I thought the crowd went fucking nuts for him. And when his music hit and he came out, whether they knew it was going to be him or not, he went over pretty big time.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest pops of the night by far. And this was a great match too. I do feel bad for Zack Sabre Jr. here though, just because if this would have been Bryan Danielson, the match would have been way more back and forth than what it was.
Yeah.
But because this is Claudio, and this is a brand new star debuting in AEW, he kind of has to, like, you kind of have to go to Zach and just be like, hey, this is kind of what it has to be now. Like, he's going to rush you and he's going to kind of overpower you, and, Zach still got his shine. I think he still was impressive. I think his technical ability and his creativity with some holds was showcased here, but I don't think it was showcased in the way that it could have been had he gone up against Danielson. And from some of the stuff that I read online from some New Japan guys, New Japan fans rather, they were kind of disappointed with the way that Zack Sabre Jr. was presented. Because again, that's somebody that the New Japan front office has put a lot of stock in to make this guy what he is. So it's just unfortunate. It's nobody's fault. This is kind of the way it has to be. But it was a great match nonetheless. But you would hope that at some point we get the Danielson-Zack Sabre Jr. match. And I would even say, as a favor to Zack and the New Japan people, whenever that match happens, either Zack needs to go over or it needs to be a draw. I don't think they need to beat him again. They need to do some kind of favor in return for the favor that he did here.
Yeah.
So just, just playing nice, playing politics. And whenever that Zack Sabre Jr. versus Danielson match does happen, I would suspect that it's going to be a banger of a match.
Yeah, Claudio is one of those dudes that I didn't really know much about from when I started watching WWE a few years ago. He just wasn't on much. He'd already kind of been buried at that point. And, once you fall out of grace with McMahon, you just don't see much out of people. Every once in a while, they'll get a little push here and there. But he was one of those guys I just thought he was low to mid-card, didn't really know shit about him. And, but, man, he looked fucking great the other night. And he fits the part right now for the Blackpool Combat Club, I think. Going forward, that's going to be a hell of a stable.
And he fits better in AEW, right? In the same way that Cody Rhodes fits better in WWE, which is Cody's strength was the promos and the entrances and the character work, and all that stuff is looked upon highly in WWE. Yep. Whereas in AEW, the emphasis is on the wrestling. And so Claudio does is he wrestles. And so putting him in there is just a match made in heaven. Now, it's going to be interesting to see, just based off the crowd reaction that Claudio has gotten both at Forbidden Door and at Blood and Guts, and all the goodwill he has from, I don't even know how long he's in WWE, over a decade. I mean, he's a well-known commodity to wrestling fans here in America. That's a lot of main event level talent in that stable now.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how they play that out and work that dynamic. Because, I mean, Danielson, Moxley, and Claudio that's a hell of a trio. It's also awesome because Tony Khan owns the Ring of Honor tape library, and some of Claudio's best work came in Ring of Honor when he was teaming with Chris Hero. If you can find some of those Kings of Wrestling matches out there for listeners on YouTube, like, those are great matches. Claudio's had awesome matches with Bryan Danielson in Ring of Honor, and it's cool too. There's a YouTube video that explains the hatred between Kingston and Claudio, which is basically, to break it down, they had almost a year-long feud in Chikara, which is a kind of indie promotion up in New England, that essentially never got finished because Claudio got signed to WWE and he left. Which is where the animosity between Kingston and Claudio comes from. Now, as with anything with Kingston, you can't tell where the work begins and where the shoot begins, right? He kind of fucking hates everybody except for like 3 people.
Yeah.
So, you have that in AEW to play with too as well. So,
that's good to know. I was kind of wondering where all that stemmed from.
Yeah. I wish I probably should have found the link for the YouTube video, but there's a guy did a really awesome job kind of breaking down that whole rivalry. So you can go find that on YouTube. I'm sure if you just type in Claudio versus Eddie Kingston rivalry, it'll be one of the first things that pop up.
Yeah. Well, another shout out Eddie Forsyth texted me the other night and said, hey, AEW just gained a hell of a worker in Claudio, because Eddie knew about him and knew like what he could bring to the organization. And I trust everything that Eddie ever says about wrestling. Eddie promoted shows back in the 70s and early 80s, and Eddie was trying to talk to me about wrestling for years when we've been working together, and finally a few years ago I showed up to work one day and was like, hey, you'll never guess what I started doing. I started watching wrestling. So that kind of became our go-to for a while. So and he texted me last night during Blood and Guts, and I was just a little behind. I was about 20 minutes behind in the show, and he's like, no spoilers, but this shit is amazing tonight. So I knew it was going to be a banger. But yeah, I'm excited to see what the future holds for Claudio. Claudio in AEW, and there's really, sky's the limit for the Blackpool Combat Club. Those guys are going to probably end up ruling most of everything going forward for a while, I would think. Do you think they keep it with the 4 for now, or do you think they expand any?
No, I think you keep it with the 4, just because it makes for a good, like, if you wanted to, and then, fantasy booking here, you could put Claudio and Wheeler in a tag team, have them win the tag team gold. You could have Bryan win the TNT title, Moxley world heavyweight title, and now, there always comes a point in some kind of stable where they contain all the gold, right? Like, that's always a thing you have to do, but it's kind of interesting here because Moxley, I think, said on a podcast this week that he kind of sees Blackpool Combat Club being what the Hart Foundation was, where, the Blackpool Combat Club will outlive all those members. Like, it'll kind of just be a badge of honor that keeps going forward. Kind of much like the way Bullet Club is now in New Japan. Bullet Club started with Finn Balor. At this point, I don't even know, it might be 10 years now. When he was Prince Devitt, and it's kind of evolved and had different iterations over the years. So maybe we see that with Blackpool Combat Club, where it becomes, you have rotating members come in and out, but I would think for the time being it sticks with these 4 guys.
Yeah. Well, we're almost 45 minutes in, and we still got a whole bunch of stuff to cover. So I say let's move on to the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship with Jay White versus Adam Cole versus Hangman Adam Page versus Okada. I think we all knew this one was going to be pretty kick-ass, and it delivered. Jay White, of course, retained like we kind of figured he would. And they put on a hell of a show. It sucks we didn't really get to the ending that we probably should have gotten or could have gotten but it looked like Adam Cole got injured there. They had to kind of figure things out on the fly. But there were some really great moments in this one.
Yeah, the only the only bummer from this, like you mentioned, is the ending, which is kind of ironic because I think you could make a case that the person that looked the best in this match was Adam Cole. I would make that argument, just the way that those super kicks he was hitting. Some of the biggest pops in that match went to him. But yeah, definitely a botch there. Well, not necessarily a botch. I mean, he got hurt because you would have to imagine that this being Okada's debut to an American audience, you would want him to hit his finishing move at least once. And he never hit the Rainmaker at all. That was that little, ripcord clothesline he was trying to hit that Cole ducked the first time, and then the second time it looked like he just almost fainted. And it looks, from some Twitter clips I saw, it seemed as if he maybe hit his head on the back of the mat and had a concussion from one of those drop kicks that Okada was doing. So unfortunate there. I think that was going to be the ending of the match, though. I think it was meant to have Okada hit the Rainmaker on Cole, and then Jay White comes in and hits Okada with that, I don't remember what Jay White calls it, the Sister Abigail, that shell shock move, and then pin Adam Cole. So that was probably the ending, but it just got kind of jumbled up there at the end because of the injury. So it's unfortunate. Yet again, we didn't get out of Forbidden Door without a big-time injury. So hopefully this is a curse that only stays in this one pay-per-view and is not a recurring theme if they do more Forbidden Doors.
Yeah.
Because if that's the case, you might want to keep that fucking door closed if everybody gets fucking hurt.
Yeah, you texted me, what was it, Saturday when they said that there was going to be a replacement in the other four-way match, and you were like, dude, this shit is fucking cursed.
Yeah, Tomohiro Ishii got, was it a fever? I think it was I don't know, I think it was a fever, yeah. So. Yeah.
The one takeaway I had from this, and I don't know how you just get this lucky. I know it's an art and it's years and years of doing this shit, but for Cole to be able to kick Hangman in the face mid fucking moonsault, the timing on that and the precision on that just blew my fucking mind.
Yeah, he's been doing it now for a couple years. He did it quite a bit in NXT. It's just a thing he can do, man. It's a skill set he has, and it looks incredible. And he uses it in a way to where it doesn't look. A lot of times when people try to do moves like that, it'll happen with the guy just like coming off the top rope, but he just jumps off the top rope like he's not actually doing a move, and so he just kind of jumps off with his hands up in there and gets kicked in the face, which is like stupid because that's not a move that anybody would do. But in Cole's case, whenever he does it to people, the people are actually doing a move. So like Hangman does that moonsault routinely in his moveset, and so he goes to do it, and boom, Cole hits him with a super kick. So the way he uses that super kick too is also creative, and it makes sense when a lot of those times that move will kind of jar you out of it a little bit because it's clearly just set up so he can do that kick. It's not something natural that's just a counter that surprises you. So
yeah. And so for the last match of the night was the AEW Interim World Championship with Jon Moxley versus Tanahashi, a.k.a. the Ace. Everyone been looking forward to this one. They built it up in the last few weeks, and it didn't let anybody down, I didn't think. I thought the intros were a nice touch there at the end with both of the announcers. I mean, they did it throughout the night, but something about it seemed a little extra for this one. Great match. They built this one up, and I thought it paid off pretty well. We kind of figured, Moxley would end up walking away with this one, and I mentioned last week on the show that it'd be nice to see Moxley with the belt in front of a crowd for a little while, since when he had it before, it was during the pandemic when there weren't any crowds around. So I think this will be good for Moxley. I think they'll probably keep it on him until Punk comes back. I don't think anybody will really give him any sort of real challenge for it. We may have a few good matches between here and there, but I think they'll leave it on Moxley the whole time. What are you thinking there?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the Moxley championship reign here, I think they'll probably just feed some, kind of mid-card guys to him so that he can beat, and, maybe we get a couple of cool storylines out of that, or maybe some cool matches out of that. I mean, I don't know if we want to get into spoilers necessarily, so if you are a person that's doesn't like spoilers, maybe fast forward for the next 30 seconds, but looks like based off the Rampage tapings, Brody King is going to be his first challenger. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, Brody won the Rumble that's supposed to be taking place tonight on Rampage. So, I mean, there you go. That's a mid-card guy that you're going to kind of just feed up to him. So, that'll probably be the thinking going forward until Punk comes back. In terms of the match, the match was really good. I think Tanahashi, he felt like a legend. He felt like a big deal. He looked like he belonged in there with Moxley. And so it was a really good match overall. I have a couple of just nitpicks, and Jon Moxley has gotten this critique quite a bit online, which is just like he uses a lot of blood in his matches. There's a lot of color. And there was just no need for this match to have any kind of color whatsoever. And it didn't even make sense in the way that they got to it, which is, I went back and watched this right before we recorded the podcast. So, like, Moxley gets hit. So Tanahashi does the boots to the face, the way that Danielson and the Blackpool Combat Club guys do. But then they get up. Moxley either shoots him off or Tanahashi shoots him off. Moxley reverses, but Tanahashi hits him with a sling blade, which is one of his signature moves. Moxley then rolls out of the ring. The camera stays on Tanahashi, so you know that, like, okay, Moxley's about to bleed here. And then, it cuts back to him and Moxley's just bleeding. Now, and that doesn't make sense at all. There was no need. You had no sensical way to get to that based off what you did. There were other ways. You could have fed him into the post, done any kind of other ways to get to him. But I would argue this match didn't need any blood to begin with, because this match isn't based off hatred. It's not a blow-off to a months-long feud. This match was built on sportsmanship, and it's an expedition that was based off of pride and sportsmanship, not hatred or animosity. So, like, just let these guys wrestle. They don't have to... Moxley doesn't have to bleed. And then the second thing, which I had an even bigger problem with, was that the ending of this, with the Jericho Appreciation Society coming out and doing the beatdown, I thought just didn't work at all.
Yeah.
And not only did I think it didn't work, I thought it was downright disrespectful to Tanahashi. If you'll go back and watch the beatdown, Tanahashi didn't get a single move of offense in on the save. So the way it works, JAS came down, they started the beatdown, Yuta, Kingston, Santana Ortiz, all those guys came out, Eddie came out, and then the big hero at the end was Claudio, right? He comes out and gets the big save. Why would you not just have Claudio do a big swing and then have Tanahashi go to the top and hit the high five flow, and then boom, you end Forbidden Door with Tanahashi standing tall, with Moxley standing tall, Blackpool Combat Club, all these guys. It was disrespectful to, I think, the legend that Tanahashi is. Meaning that, like, you wouldn't have done this to, like, Ric Flair. You know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't have done this. They don't even do this to Sting in AEW. They don't have him get beat down to where he has no kind of comeback whatsoever. So, yeah, I think it was kind of not the right call there, particularly if you're trying to ingratiate yourself to these Japanese fans to watch your product. How's that going to feel if you were a Japanese fan who loved Tanahashi? How's it going to make you feel to see him at the end of the pay-per-view just getting his ass kicked in the corner and never even getting in a lick of offense on the bad guys,
Yeah.
So, like, and by the way, that's an actual critique that I saw from fans posting on Reddit and posting online, which were like, hey, that was kind of fucked up what they did to Tanahashi. So
it did seem like a weird way to end it.
We also didn't need it. Like, you spent this whole pay-per-view talking about blood and guts. Like, we don't need it to continue to spill over. Like, it could have just ended with Moxley and Tanahashi shaking hands, and the pay-per-view just goes off the air, and it would have been awesome.
Yeah.
You don't need a hat on a hat, so to speak. You don't need to keep adding stuff.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there weren't a lot of things really to critique about it. I didn't think, but that would be one. I've complained about the last couple of pay-per-views. The Bleacher Report app is just absolute garbage. I thought it was maybe just with the Fire Stick because I had seen a lot of people complaining on Twitter about it not working well with the Fire Stick. Well, I put it on my iPad and then cast to the TV, and that was horse shit as well. But it's like it was just finally after the first 2 hours, it finally worked, and I didn't really have any problems for the last 2 hours. But it was just I was behind because I would end up seeing shit. I would open Twitter and be like, "Oh, well, that happened," and I missed it because I'm behind because it's just stopped and started so many times. If anybody out there's listening, I think you can get it on Fight TV as well, right? Is Fight TV any fucking better? Because I just have shit luck with the Bleacher Report app. I don't have that many problems with any other apps that I use.
I think with Fight TV, though, you can only get it outside the States. I don't think you can get it in America.
Shit.
Yeah. That's weird because I haven't had any, like I watched it on my phone and didn't have any problems. I could even like rewind it on my phone, which I feel like I couldn't do last time with the pay-per-view. I might be mistaken.
I know I couldn't last time.
Yeah, I was able to rewind it on my phone. But yeah, they got to do something. Hopefully there is some kind of deal in the works because you're not the only person that continues to have these problems.
Yeah. Do you need to wrap that up in any way, like before we move to Blood and Guts? Because we're almost at the hour mark already.
No, just it'll be cool. I think this is a good precedent going forward. Like, let's do this every year. Maybe next year you might see some more New Japan guys get some wins. They got kind of beat. I think the only two that the Dudes with Attitude match, the New Japan guy got the win in that. And then, of course, Jay White got the win in his match. So, yeah, maybe in Ospreay, yeah, that's true. So maybe you see some more 50-50 booking next time. But, yeah, I thought it was top to bottom one of the best wrestling cards in recent memory, for sure.
Yeah. So, Blood and Guts was last night. They jumped straight into it with Orange Cassidy and Ethan Page. Dan Lambert comes out and tells best friends that they can't leave. They've got to leave ringside because they are not managers and there's rules and regulations and
stupid.
This, that, and the other. It was nice to see Chuck back out there. I didn't know if he had been injured. I can't remember if I brought that up last week. I noticed he had not been on there for a while, and they had started the Roppongi Vice thing back up, and I was like, well, what are they doing with Chuck? And then there was even somewhere came out yesterday that there were rumblings if his contract was expiring because Alan Angel's contract is run up and he won't be there anymore for Dark Order and blah, 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 Chuck Taylor. But then Chuck Taylor shows up last night with Trent, and I was happy to see that. But I think they're building Cassidy up here a little bit, and I'm all for it because I like watching him wrestle. He always puts on a good show. I love his spinning, flying DDT. He's just an entertainer.
He got new entrance music too. Did you recognize that?
Yeah, he did.
It fits him way better, by the way.
Yeah. I really like the Pixies. Where is my mind?
It doesn't. I don't think it fits his character though. Like his character with the sunglasses, he's supposed to look cool, and so when that guitar kicks in on James, and he comes walking out in the white background, that fits him way better.
Yeah.
But other than that, they're building him up. I mean, he's been one of their most over stars they've had for a while. Like you said, the Dan Lambert stuff with the you don't have manager's license, that's just fucking stupid. Figure out another way to kick those guys out. You can't do it that way because, that's not a thing that audience members know. People don't know that the shit's controlled by athletic commissions. That's stupid. That's getting too in the weeds. Figure out some kind of other thing. Or just, how about they just don't come out? Fuck, they can do that too, So, I don't know. It's good. Yeah. Whatever. There's not a lot from Blood and Guts. I think the Christian Cage Luchasaurus thing was probably the only other thing, that plus the Blood and Guts worth talking about. Did you think the Luchasaurus mask, the new look, worked?
I'm a little torn.
I'm not. He still looks fucking stupid. Figure out, do something different.
Yeah, I kind of. Do you think they're leaning into? They may be moving away from that.
No, because the new thing that said Luchasaurus, and he got the fire, and they wouldn't do a new mask.
Oh, a whole new entrance.
Yeah, if they were just gonna take it away from him in a couple weeks, he looks still stupid. Do another mask, you know?
Because he dyed his beard and his hair.
Yeah, like you can't. Kane. So a good comp is Kane, right, from WWE. Kane is a cool name. It has biblical allusions to it. He came in with The Undertaker. They were supposed to be brothers, so Kane works. You can scream Kane and it should strike some fear into the opponent, whatever. You can't say Luchasaurus. Like, when you think of that name, you don't think of a bad guy or a monster heel. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just do something else with it. The dude has talent. If you're going to pair him with Christian Cage, give him a complete redesign. Last night was the perfect way to do it. You can, if you want to still have him in a mask, if he feels more comfortable working under a mask, I don't know. He might be ugly as shit under there, so I don't know. Maybe that's why they want to keep him in a mask. Well, just do a different mask then. Yeah. It just looks stupid. And I don't know. Listeners out there probably disagree with me, but it's just not working, man.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see that play out when Jungle Boy's well enough to be back. I figure they'll have him back on TV sooner than later, so he can at least react to some of the stuff, even if he's not ready to come back and wrestle yet.
They'll probably hold him off until he can come back and wrestle, just because the amount of vitriol that Christian Cage has spewed his way. It makes no sense for him to not come back and not get physical with him immediately.
Yeah, that's true.
So, whenever is he actually hurt?
Yeah, okay. I think he's one. I
can't keep up with who's hurt in storyline and who's actually hurt in real life.
Yeah. I don't know what the extent of his injury is, but they said he is actually hurt.
Okay, yeah. So, keep him on the shelf until he can come back and fight, because he'll come running back out the tunnel, and he also needs new music, too. It's not going to fit him. Yeah. Going forward.
I did want to circle back real quick. I loved the Orange Cassidy kind of teasing Lambert with the little fake little taps, and then taking that swig of OJ, hitting Paige with the move, and then spitting the OJ in Lambert's face was a nice touch, I thought, and a nice way to end that match.
Yeah, but if Lambert's going to bring out orange juice, he needs to actually use it in the match. You know, I thought when Cassidy got spilled out on the outside and Lambert was hitting him with the fake kicks, that's what he was going to do. He was going to open up the orange juice and just pour it in his face. Yeah. But not pour all of it to where, obviously you can still do the thing at the end. So.
Yeah. So it looks like we are going to get Wardlow and Scorpio Sky next week. That should be good. I figure they'll end up putting it on Wardlow. You don't build him up to have him lose a title match that quickly, right?
The only caveat and the only thing that I could see is that it's a street fight, so it's no DQ, so you maybe could get away with some fuckery to where Scorpio keeps it, but if we're gonna do the Wardlow thing, then let's do the Wardlow thing. Sometimes AEW just waits too long. Yeah. And it works in some instances, right? Like the Hangman, you told this basically 2-year odyssey for him getting the belt. But then sometimes they just wait around too long and don't pull the trigger. Wardlow, he's was never going to be as over as what he was 3 weeks ago, because he was one of the most over guys on the roster already 3 weeks ago. So you can only diminish it going forward, right? Yeah. That was one of the arguments I had for Jeff Hardy and Matt Hardy needed to immediately come in and win the AEW tag team titles, because they're never going to be as over as what they were when they first debuted on AEW. So go ahead and get that out of the way, give them the titles, put them in a meaningful feud. Now they've waited around to where, Jeff has done his thing to where, who knows if we see the Hardy Boys again in AEW. We wasted that entire thing and got nothing for it. So let's have Wardlow beat Scorpio and give him the title, and let's try to put him in some meaningful feuds, and let's see if he's a main event level player.
Yeah.
But it scares me that it's a street fight.
Yeah. Yeah, that you could be right about that going that way. So do you think it cheapened FTR any to bring them out to team with Danhausen to face off against Max Caster with the Gun Club?
No, because now FTR are the good guys to where, now they're so good that they're taking up the cause for bullied people in the roster, right? Because now Danhausen's been bullied. They've portrayed him as not that great of a wrestler, which I think is a good call. And so, yeah, you just bring out FTR. And I knew immediately when they didn't introduce who his tag team partners were in the graphic, I was like, oh, it's going to be FTR. Because if you look on social media and stuff too, like FTR's been on his blog or vlog. I'm sorry. They tweet about each other all the time. So
Gotcha.
And you just want to have that pop of you got to put FTR in some kind of position where they can come out with those belts, having all those belts strapped around them. So that's a good of a thing to do it anyway. I will say the Gun Club is impressive, and I know we've got this thing we call them the Ass Boys, and it's all fun, and it's getting them over and putting them in a good position. But like they can actually go, they can wrestle, they got some potential.
Yeah, I mean they look good in the ring.
I don't know if it's not the tall one, but the other one, the one that looks more like Billy Gunn. I think it's Colton, it might be Austin, I don't know. He's really impressive. Yeah. And just his little mannerisms, you can tell that his obviously fucking Billy Gunn is a legend in his own right, so the apple doesn't fall that far from the tree. That's in a nice little storyline, mid-card story for them to tell there, with Billy Gunn turning on his own sons for the Acclaimed. We'll see what they do with that.
So let's get into the main event. The huge payoff. The thing lasted about an hour. We mentioned earlier they saved bringing in Eddie, Kingston, and Jericho for the end, and a lot of damage had already been done at that point. Santana got legit injured, fucked up his leg pretty good, it looked like. It just kind of buckled on him early on in the match, and he rolled out and kind of called for help on the side or whatever. But there's a lot of interesting spots in this one. Claudio went real hard, was just uppercutting the hell out of everybody. That was fun to watch. We kind of talked about this too off air before we started. One of our problems we've had with AEW before, and it's going to happen in a match like this where there's way too many things going on, but they pulled up the carpet on one of the rings, and then we never really saw what happened over there because shit was popping off everywhere else.
They were also in a commercial when it happened, which is another thing. The commercial breaks, the timing of them were just absolutely awful. I mean, we got guys pouring out thumbtacks, and then Excalibur's throwing the break, and there's like a fucking Domino's commercial. And you're like, what the fuck is going on in the ring? Like, I can't see it. And I think that's when whatever they did, when pulling up the canvas and exposing the boards, I think all that happened in the commercial break. But like you said, like we just kept going to commercial break, or we would just miss it. So it happens in matches like this sometimes, but commercial breaks are. I mean, that's one of the things we do in these big time matches like this on free television, right? You got to pay for them somehow. So if you ain't gonna pay for them at a pay per view, you're gonna have to watch a Subway commercial that you've seen 800 times everywhere else. Yeah. So, but other than that, I thought the match was. This kind of stuff isn't my cup of tea necessarily. I would much rather watch matches like Ospreay and Orange Cassidy as opposed to watch something like this. But kudos to Sammy for taking that bump off the top, and not that the bump, I mean, they had crash pads there obviously, so like I'm not saying it didn't hurt, but it probably felt about the same as taking a bump in the ring. But just the way he sold it, he was completely limp and just had enough body control to get himself over, so that was cool. And then you set up even more hatred or maybe some kind of insidious thing lurking there between Claudio and Eddie Kingston, giving Claudio the win while they were up there at the top. So hopefully we put this Blackpool Combat Club Jericho Appreciation Society thing behind us, and we move forward. The big thing is going to be what do we do with Claudio now? Do we Claudio and Kingston? Because like we mentioned, Kingston was the last guy to come in this match, and he had the fans. Yeah, he gets as big crowd reactions as John Moxley does, and Moxley's the heavyweight champ. So a lot of stuff now could potentially be swirling around Eddie Kingston, and I've seen some people post online these like fan theories about like how AEW goes through these main characters. Like the last 2 years of AEW, the main character's really been Hangman Page because everything's kind of swirled around him a little bit. And so this user on Reddit was posting about how they believe Eddie Kingston is the next rising main character in AEW because you have everything kind of swirling around him at this point, which is interesting. I don't know if I buy it completely, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know what goes on from here because none of this was probably the original plan, right? The plan wasn't for Punk to get hurt and put the belt on Moxley. The plan probably wasn't to have Claudio join the Blackpool Combat Club this fast. So now probably you got a lot of balls in the air you're trying to juggle here.
So they've already announced another pay-per-view for the end of July, if I'm not correct, if I'm not wrong.
That's a Ring of Honor, I think, solely.
Okay, gotcha.
I think Death Before Dishonor.
That's it. You're right.
Yeah, I don't know. When's the next AEW pay-per-view? November?
Should be a while because they typically, it's once a quarter.
Yeah. Because the Arthur Ashe is the next one, the next big show in September.
Gotcha. So I totally missed that.
Yeah. And then I think sometime in November. What is it? Full Gear, I think is what's up next.
Sounds
Could
right.
be wrong, but yeah. Overall, it was a good 2 nights of wrestling, and AEW is in a good spot. If people want to shit on the television ratings being down, being up, whatever. First of all, I don't even buy that those television ratings are real numbers because, does it account for people that stream, through YouTube? It obviously doesn't count for people that stream it illegally, which is half the damn internet at this point, particularly young people. Like, ain't no young people got cable no more, so, like, whatever, 800,000, who knows if that's a real number. What can't be disputed is that when AEW goes in these cities, these are hot-ass crowds that they're in. These crowds for both Detroit and Chicago were in it for the entire thing, so.
Yeah, shit, what were you saying? What did they say last night? It was a Wednesday night. There was 13,000. Was it 13,000 last night?
It's a basketball arena. So,
It's a lot of fucking
it holds
for a Wednesday night.
holds probably at max, probably 16,000 people, so.
Yeah.
There's an excitement level around AEW that has been there for a while. Because one of the things that people have always... You hear a lot of old-timers talk about this, right? That, like, wrestling needs to appeal to the casual fan again. And I think that completely misses the point about where our culture is at currently. There are no casual fans of really anything outside of football, basketball, and baseball. Right? I think those are the only 3 things that have casual fans.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, what the internet has done is it's created these niche environments to where you can everyone just retreats into whatever they want. If it's anime, if it's wrestling, MMA, whatever. And you you build up a dedicated fan base that way. There are no cultural monoliths anymore. All that stuff's dead. The internet killed all that stuff. Game of Thrones was the last thing that was a big cultural touchstone that everyone in this country and around the world kind of got behind and watched kind of at the same time. And once that ended, it all ended. So I don't...
Yeah, even things now like Stranger Things, which are pretty fucking big, are still very, very niche.
Very niche. And so I think what wrestling should do is it needs to create more new wrestling fans, not appeal necessarily to casual wrestling fans who have stopped watching. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And the way that you create these new fans is that you put out a badass wrestling product like a Forbidden Door, so that if I am a wrestling fan and I'm telling my other friends, like, hey man, I know you don't like wrestling, but like, can I show you like what this is? And then people get intrigued and they start watching, and that's how you get people to your product. This myth of the casual wrestling fan that exists out there is just not true, I don't think, at all. And I think it's just, like I said, it completely misses the point about where the current culture is at currently with just the internet. The internet has disrupted so much stuff. There's no casual nothing anymore. It's hardcore, dedicated fan bases all the way. And so you should create those fans, and you should pull those fans from other things, but not... You can't appeal to this mythical fan anymore. Yeah. Also, those fans aren't coming back either. I mean, the Attitude Era, when you look at those television ratings that were doing tens of millions of fans every single week, and they were the highest rated programs on television, that was a very specific time in the culture, right? You had...
That was, I mean, but the internet wasn't really popping off at that point either.
It wasn't,
and you definitely didn't have like high speed internet.
No,
at that
and
point.
You had what wrestling did is that it kind of rode the wave of cable television. And the 90s, cable television was, hey, we can put a lot more explicit stuff on TV because we're not bound by FCC regulations. And so a guy like Stone Cold, who's flipping people off and drinking beers, well, shit, he looks really damn cool on television. Stone Cold's one of the most popular television characters of all time in this country. He's not just one of the most popular wrestlers of all time. I mean, there's a handful of television characters that are as popular as him. So, like, I just think it just misses completely, and people don't understand that wrestling is ingrained in this larger culture as a whole. So, there's a lot of word salad there, but I think hopefully we got to a fucking point. It's not the casual fan's not coming back. 10 million people aren't going to watch wrestling anymore. So quit fucking bitching over it. Like you can create a devoted fan base worldwide for people that just like this style of wrestling and like wrestling as a whole.
Yeah, you bought the shirt a while back at of CM Punk and a young MJF on it. There's not nearly as many people that are going to recognize that walking around these days as, you know, we're wearing Austin 316 shirts back in the day, but when somebody sees it, they're going to know what the fuck it is, and they're going to appreciate it.
Right, and a dedicated fan base is going to spend more money on stuff. Right. And they're going to tell their friends about it, and, you know, when my son grows up and can watch wrestling, I'm going to introduce him to wrestling, and then, you know, hopefully he likes it, and then he goes, and it just trickles down from there.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I do with my son. My son's 22, and when I came home a few years ago from filming a wrestling event all weekend, I was like, hey, I think I'm going to watch a wrestling match. And he kind of laughed at me. And then we watched a Ric Flair versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat match on YouTube because he couldn't really find a lot of full WWE matches. And I watched that match, and he was like, wait a minute, I think I enjoy this. And that's kind of what jump started us into it. You know, we bought the WWE app and started watching some classic matches to kind of get up to speed on things because I hadn't watched wrestling since I was a kid, and he had never watched it. And he was like, "Yeah, I think this is something that I do now." So that's how we spend our Wednesday and Friday evenings, and then a Sunday evening once a quarter now. So. Yeah, I don't know. I do see people coming back to it every once in a while. You see tweets from, you know, when Cody was in AEW, he would retweet people that were like, "Hey, I haven't watched wrestling in 10 or 15 years, and I really like what you guys are doing with AEW." I think people that got out of it at one point are coming back to it, but they're not coming back to WWE. I think there's a lot of people that are watching AEW instead.
And also, that's not a casual fan; that's a lapsed fan. Right, like there's a difference. I'm a casual NBA fan, and that when the playoffs roll around, I watch the NBA.
Right.
So that's they're two different things, and I don't know. I don't even know why I brought that up. It just bugs me whenever I see people that say stupid shit like that on Twitter or on social media or whatever, because they just act like this is the same. People consume content the same way they did in like 1994. Which is like not 1994 is like might as well be the damn Jurassic period when it comes to how people create, you know, engage with content now.
Yeah. Well, I say let's move on and try to get wrapped up for the week. Tell me what's done up real good for you.
Have you been watching The Boys on Amazon Prime?
We started it. We finished. I want to say we finished season 1, and then. I don't remember what happened. Probably, if I had to guess, I would say my busy season started last year at work when I was working a lot of sporting events at UNA, and then we just never finished up any of it. But we enjoyed what we watched. It's just one of those things that we just haven't finished.
So I recently got caught up on this current season 3 of The Boys. And this last episode that aired last Friday was one of the craziest, most off-the-wall episodes of television I think I've ever seen.
Was that the Hero-gasm?
Hero-gasm, yeah. And so I love this show for taking chances. It's fucking swinging for the fences. It doesn't care to be politically incorrect. It doesn't care to be irreverent. The fucking Hero-gasm started. You remember that stupid ass Imagine video that came out last year with Gal Gadot? Yeah. So it did a complete spoof of that to start off this thing. So like, just the way it pokes fun and the way that it's subverting this superhero genre that's become so just bland over the past couple of years. Like, I just love this show so much. So yeah, check it out there if listeners haven't watched it. The Boys. You can watch the first 2 seasons on Amazon Prime right now, and then I think every Friday they release a new episode. I think it's Friday. So
cool.
Yeah, check it out.
Awesome. Well, mine is pretty simple. What's done up real good is that several months back we bought a Pampered Chef ice cream maker, and I've been making ice cream at home, and it is fucking awesome because I can put whatever I want in it. One of my favorites in the world is the Tonight Dough by Ben & Jerry's. It's kind of hard to top that one, but I've done a pretty good job. I make a chocolate-based ice cream, and I put Oreos, cookie dough, and Reese's Cups in there.
Oh, shit.
Because Reese's Cups has been the one thing that cookie dough has always kind of been missing for me. And it's fucking delicious. I love it. I love all those things. I like my ice cream to have some texture in it.
Yeah.
You know, some chunks of something.
Yeah.
So I've got to cut back on that, though. I've been eating way too much ice cream. Yeah. It's super easy to make. It makes 3 or 4 pints at a time. So I'll make it. A couple hours later, it's nice and frozen. And we've got ice cream for the evening, and I'm doing that way too often. But it's super delicious. I think that's all we've got for the week, man. It'll be kind of weird next week because you'll be back in the office for the first time in 6 weeks, so we'll be recording in person, but we won't be coming off of 2 huge events, like a pay-per-view and what you could almost amount to a pay-per-view in Blood and Guts. So, but I'm sure we'll come out and we'll deliver our best for you next week. So yeah, check us out if you don't already on Twitter and Instagram. We're at Alabama Slam Pod, and you can follow the Alabama Take on Facebook. Look us up on TeePublic, and get a shirt if you want a shirt. I bought one. Any money that's made from those sales goes back into keeping the Alabama Take website up and running. There's shirts for our show. There's shirts for the main site that just say the Alabama Take. There's shirts for Taking It Down, which is Blaine Duncan's pop culture podcast. And there's shirts that just say Done Up Real Good if you want those. And any podcasts that we have in the future, we'll have shirts there as well. You can get coffee mugs, stickers, all that stuff. So go there and buy a shirt or a coffee mug or something if you'd like. And follow us and try to review us on Apple Podcasts. Everybody tells us all the time that helps get you up in the viewership on the app, and people will find our show more easily. And refer a friend, tell a friend about us if you like the show. But we'll be back. Patrick will be live next week, and I guess we'll see you guys then.
Later, guys. Good pod, Corey.